Hello and welcome to another episode of Office Hours. So today we are changing things up just a little bit. And I say that because our guest is actually coming back from being in the field. She is an MSL, Quinee. So she will be popping in a few minutes when she's able to join us. And so in the meantime, for those of you who don't know who I am Dr. Swathi Varanasi-Diaz, and I am the Director of Client Success at the MSL Academy. I also am an MSL and consultant as well. All right, so I would love to hear where everyone is tuning in from. If you could hop it in the chat just to ensure that I am getting all of the information on everyone who's here. Yeah, so we want to make this as interactive as possible. If you've joined us before for any of these chats, you know that we love questions and we love answering any and all questions that we can for you. This is specifically targeted to people who are interested in making a transition into the MSL role. So if that's you, we are more than excited to answer your questions. If you're also a current MSL and you want to share some of your insights in the chat, you're also welcome to do that. Again, we want to make this as interactive as possible. So I'm going to be monitoring the chat. I do want to say from the last time that we did this, unfortunately, our chat didn't actually translate. And so we actually didn't see any of the chat comments or anything until after. So it looks like I'm getting, okay, amazing. So someone's already put something in the chat. Great. So as we have people trickling in, as well as our guest, please do not hesitate to start putting questions in the chat. This could be anything about like how to utilize your transferable skills into, like, let's say you don't have industry experience and you're wondering how to utilize, previous experience and, engage with storytelling and everything in the interview process. It could be, tips and tricks for improving your resume. It could be questions about day in the life, things like that, as an MSL. So please start populating the chat so we can make sure that we have enough time to get through it. So I will let everyone have a few minutes to do that exact thing. So sorry, I'm getting some reverb here. Okay, so yes, please feel free to put your, inquiring about that. I'm getting, sorry if you can hear that. Yeah, I'm getting some reverb. Okay, but yeah, please feel free to put some information in the chat about where you're tuning in from. But also, if you have any questions for us, we are going to be getting to all of our questions so that we can answer them soon. So, as we think about, diving into today's topic, I would love to talk first about what is an MSL. So an MSL is a professional within the pharmaceutical industry or biotech traditionally, and they're a part of the functional area or department called the Medical Affairs Department or functional area. And so the Medical Science Liaison is positioned to be the liaison or kind of the external stakeholder, the stakeholder that engages with external stakeholders. So this is someone who represents the company, goes into the field, and actually speaks with people in the field. And when I say people, I mean healthcare providers. I mean the personnel that are called key opinion leaders or KOLs. And so it's people who can really provide insights on what is going on in their clinical practice. The MSL engages with them and is able to bring back some of that key information from these opinion leaders so that internal decision-making can then be facilitated based on that information. Also, MSLs are responsible for educating healthcare providers and these key opinion leaders in the field about the product, again, from a very educational perspective. So the medical science liaison is not a role that is promotional. It's actually a role that is predominantly based on education and informing people in the field about what is going on at the company and vice versa. All right. So someone said in the chat, I'm trying to transition into an MSL role and have been applying to MSL roles for some time now, but I do not get any response from them or my application is rejected immediately. So there are a lot of reasons why this could be happening. To get an MSL role is actually quite competitive. And so I wouldn't take it personally if, you are applying and not hearing anything positive back, because there are so many applications that the HR personnel and hiring managers do sift through. That being said, I would suggest that, there's so many things I could say about this. One of the things I would say is it's best to apply to a role if it's been posted within about a week. Generally, they get some days in the HR personnel. They, get so many applications. And so they may or may not even look at applications that have come in after a week. Honestly, if you speak to some people, they might say a week is too long for a job to be posted because too many applications will have come through. And actually, within the first 72 hours is kind of the time frame in which you should be looking at applying to roles. And so, that can be really important to actually get your resume looked at. Oh, I do see in the chat, so you said I've tailored my resume to being an MSL. Amazing. So tailoring your resume is going to be the next point. So when you apply, super important. The next thing is, tailoring your resume. So it sounds like you've already done that, which is great. For other people who are wondering what tailoring your resume means. So tailoring your resume means, are you using terminology that will resonate with the people who are viewing it? So this means, using terminology like KOLs, using terminology like clinical insights, using terminology that is very much associated with medical affairs and with being a medical science liaison and just overall in the pharmaceutical industry and drug development. And so, then I get the question, but what if I'm a community pharmacist? Like, how do I talk about KOLs? I mean, if you're working in a community pharmacy setting, so let's say in the retail setting, you are engaging with key opinion leaders or healthcare providers or these external stakeholders all the time. I mean, when you get a prescription and you are noticing like, oh, there's something wrong about the prescription, you actually engage and have to, call up the healthcare provider or the person involved to actually, have a great conversation about, why or why not you would be willing to fill this prescription for XYZ reason. And so it's all about reframing and, utilizing the skills that you have now to showcase why, even though you don't have industry experience or you don't have MSL experience, you're really interested in demonstrating that you have the skills from previous roles that will help you be a successful MSL. Communication is so important for being an effective MSL. And so that would be, how can you demonstrate in your current role how you've been an effective communicator? How can you demonstrate in your resume that in not every bullet point, but most bullet points that you are showing some sort of quantifiable outcome? Like if you implemented some sort of change, what was the impact to the bottom line of revenue? Or what was the impact to, the number of, increased engagement or turnaround or decrease in errors or something? Like, how can you demonstrate that the impact and intervention that you had actually had some sort of impact and benefit? And that is something that in the interview process, you will be asked many, many times, not explicitly, like, how have you had impact on these certain things, but it will come up time and time again in different ways in the interview process through questions. So those are two of the things I would say is tailoring your resume. And then the other thing is, trying to apply to roles that haven't, that have been posted less than a week, or some people would even say less than 72 hours since it's been posted. And so a lot of ways to keep up to date with different, different roles that are being posted is you can set Google alerts, you can set LinkedIn alerts, especially if you're interested in particular companies. You can set alerts so that straight to your email once something is posted that fits the medical science liaison, job title or otherwise, that you get an email. So those are two ways. And then there are other things too. So I'm definitely going to, we can come back to this question absolutely once Quinee is able to join us, because I'd love to hear if she has any other, additional things. Actually, I just thought of something else that I really want to mention right now. So I'm going to mention it. So this is something she might bring up as well, is that, more than simply applying, it's really important to see if you can connect with someone from the company. So this could mean, looking in your LinkedIn, seeing if there's anyone in your network that you've worked with before, that you've had a professional relationship or even like personal relationship with, like maybe from your friends group or extended group. Is there anyone that works at that particular company? Because if that's the case, then I would suggest sending a message to them and just letting them know, like, hey, if you haven't spoken to them in a while, setting up a moment to catch up and just letting them know that you applied to that role, because it really is important to create that extra personal or professional connection in addition to simply applying. Oh, and Quinee's joining us. Amazing. So let me let her introduce herself, and I will also ask her to answer this question too.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Good evening. I apologize for being late. Just had a little bit of, MSL things that come up last minute, and we're on the road a lot, so you just got to wing it and be flexible. That's part of the job. So yeah, my name is Quinee. I became an MSL. I can't believe it. It's going to be almost 5 years. If in March of 2021. So yeah, it'll be 5 years in March of 2026. It was such an exciting transition. So before I became an MSL, I used to actually be a pharmacy owner. I used to operate an independent pharmacy. I sold it during the pandemic, figured out what I wanted to do. And actually, I stumbled upon this course, and, it led me this way, gave me all the information I needed to be an MSL and what the job entailed. And I truly wanted to know, is this something that's for me? And, I don't look back, because this job is made for me. I feel I love what I do. I get to connect with like-minded individuals. So yeah, it's great. And at that time I was living in the New York, New Jersey area. I now currently reside in Connecticut. I am currently in the neuroscience space as an MSL and migraine. So love what I do. But yeah, Swathi, you said that there was a question for me. I'd love to answer it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we're already getting questions in the chat. So it's actually perfect timing, because I was just answering the first one. So someone was, just kind of sharing their experience that, they are trying to transition to the MSL role. They've been applying to MSL roles for some time now, and they actually haven't gotten like a positive response yet, or their application is just getting rejected. So they're wondering, like, what can they do to actually stand out? They said that they've already taken some steps to tailor their resume. And so I can just tell you what I briefly talked about.
Yes,
I think it's really important to, apply within a week, or honestly, like within 72 hours of a job being posted, just because so many applications come through. So that was one of the things. I also said, tailoring your resume is really important, and that storytelling and, each bullet point, if not all, but a lot of the bullet points showing quantifiable impact. And so I think that's very important. And then the third thing was, not only applying, but thinking about what sorts of personal or professional connections you can make with that company. So utilizing your LinkedIn network, thinking about who or who, perhaps you worked with literally 10 years ago in a pharmacy that now might have transitioned into industry, like who could potentially put in that internal referral or something, so that gives you that extra bridge into getting into that company, because simply sending an application just sometimes isn't enough.
Yeah, those are all, that's great feedback and great advice. I couldn't agree with you anymore. And I think you did actually hit all the major points there. I would just like to hone in on that. Hey, you see that job description and maybe you didn't serve as an MSL, but whether you're a pharmacist or a PhD or an MD by training, we have so many transferable skills. And so look at that description. Go line by line, be like, what have I done this in a different manner? Maybe the pharma lingo is different than what you're used to. But 9 out of 10 times, I bet you that when you go through the job descriptions, your skills are transferable. And it's so important to highlight that in your resume. And yeah, I agree. 72 hours is that mark. It's posted. And you don't want to just send any resume. You can't just send a resume that you have. You have to really tailor it to what that company's looking for. Find out what their vision is, what maybe their company culture is. Try to entail that in your resume. That's very important. But yeah, I think other than that, Swati, I think you got all the major points. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, definitely. Amazing. So, if you have any follow-up questions on the person who wrote in about that, please add it to the chat and we can continue this discussion, because transferable skills is one of the things that I absolutely love talking about, just because there's so many people that we've either worked with at the MSL Academy, or people that I'm speaking to who want to become an MSL, and they simply just don't feel like they're confident in what they're able to provide because they haven't had an industry specific job before. And I always try to hone in that it is not just about having industry experience. It's demonstrating that you understand the role of an MSL. What are you going to do as an MSL? And then what have you done in the past that will contribute and demonstrate that you will be effective in that role? So even thinking about doing in-service presentations in the hospital, you are able to convey complicated concepts to the audience that has, XYZ demonstrable impact on, the way that, patient care is executed or outcomes or different things like that. How are you in your current role creating impact, and how are you doing it through the skills that are required to be an effective MSL is really the core of what anyone is looking for, paired with the right terminology. And right before you hopped on, Quinee, that's what I was talking about too, is giving an example of a community pharmacist that's engaging with healthcare providers, if a prescription is wrong. Yeah, I mean, you're engaging with a KOL or a healthcare provider, some external stakeholder, and then you are then impacting their decision making. And that's important. So yeah, happy to hop into any more discussion about transferable skills or anything as the conversation progresses. But that was great. Okay. So here's another question that's kind of based off of that. So how can someone improve their application materials if they don't have any industry experience?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, Swati, I can't hear you. Sorry, you're freezing up a little bit. Just want to make sure that.
Oh, goodness. Okay, let me see. I just turned off my external light. I wonder if that maybe will impact it. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Anyway, so yeah, so it's going to be a little dark over in these parts now without that light. But either way, so it's more important that you can hear me. The next question is, how can someone improve their application materials if they don't have any industry experience? So this kind of speaks to what we were saying before, but how would you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, again, it goes down to the language of 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 the not just the job description itself, but based on maybe your past experience. It goes back to that. So we kind of just answered that question a little bit on that too. And also, I did struggle with that when I was applying as an MSL, because to me, I'm like, wait, so I kind of did this, and it was questionable because the way these descriptions are written are so different than what we are used to clinically. It's talking about, Do you have experience with scientific exchange? Of course we do. Just like what Swathi said, like you're getting a prescription changed, you're making recommendations. That's all scientific exchange, for example. But the course that I actually took here with MSL Academy kind of helped me understand. Okay, yeah, I've done X, Y, and Z. I've actually done all of these things. So it's a fine line of trying to understand, but maybe you can reach out to your LinkedIn colleagues there, see who's in industry, see who's willing to kind of explain those little concepts or the vocabulary of pharma to you, and you can kind of go from there. But it's definitely doable.
Yes, definitely. And I touched on, what an MSL is in the beginning, but we do have a question in the chat that says, I'm interested in becoming an MSL. Can someone please, educate me on the MSL job responsibilities? So I kind of gave a little bit of my 2 cents in the beginning. Quinee, how would you describe, what are the job responsibilities of an MSL?
Yeah, I mean, our main goal is to have that personable connection with an HCP. And for those who are wondering what an HCP, it's a healthcare professional, or KOL, it's key opinion leader. And that's one of our main thing, is to be able to communicate at a higher level. Maybe there's a new trial that came out and you're supporting it, or you just got trained in a new product. It's not anything salesy or promotional. It's scientific based. So at the end of the day, your main goal is that when you're providing this scientific clinical research, you're helping a patient out. You're able to give a provider this information that they may not have privy to, because we have more information than maybe the sales rep that they spoke to. And it's unbiased. It's non-promotional material. So that would be the first portion of the job. But one of the biggest things that you need to really have in this role is flexibility. There's things that change. You can have a meeting that you set up and it can get canceled. Your day can go totally different than what you planned on. So flexibility is so important. Also, being organized. You do make your own schedule, which is a blessing, but also a curse in some ways, because you are not only going around your own personal busy schedule, you're going around your KOL schedule. You might have a large territory. So, someone, if I'm in New York, someone in Jersey might want to see me. So I got to figure out how I'm going to make that work. So, I would say those are the major things that wasn't probably touched on.
Great. And then, leading up to this live, I also had a bunch of questions that were sent in from our community. So, I'm just going to look at them right now. So one of them was like, let's see. Oh, so looking back, what do you think helped you stand out amongst other candidates, particularly those who didn't have, industry experience? Like, why do you think you were able to be successful transitioning from being a pharmacist to an MSL?
That's a great question. I think the biggest thing was, like, I had unique experience in terms of being a business owner, let alone owning a pharmacy. I think that they really, sometimes, depending on your role, I think with this role in particular, we had a few new launches coming out. They really wanted someone that's able to think outside of the box, think independently, and they're innovated. And I think that I was able to really hone in on those skills. And one of my superpower, I would say, is that I'm really great with connecting with other individuals. Like, I can have nothing in common with them, but somehow I find a way to connect with them. And I think that has helped me be a successful MSL.
I love that you bring that up, because it's really showcasing that being unconventional is actually something that's more of a pro than a con. And I think when some people are thinking about, oh, I'm going into the behemoth that is corporate, that is the pharmaceutical industry, like they need to fit into some sort of particular box, because they see the job description, they see the requirements and the qualifications, if you ask me, and I probably say this every single live because I feel so passionately about it, I think job requirements that are listed in job descriptions, like when it says requirements or required, qualifications or whatever it says, like to me, those are recommendations. Like I always read them and I'm like, that's nice. And then I just apply anyway. Because it's like, as long as you can demonstrate that you can do the core responsibilities or you have experiences that speak to what the role is going to entail. And granted, it might look a little bit different. Like maybe you're involved in entrepreneurship, or you come from a bit more of an unconventional, background, it's actually potentially going to help you. And I feel like that perspective is great because a lot of people get a little apprehensive about, being a little bit different applying to these roles.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I feel that I'm not going to lie, when I was applying to be an MSL, I was very intimidated, especially like I would listen to these podcasts. I even spoke to colleagues. Like I reached out to so many of my colleagues on LinkedIn, and there were many that told me like, hey, I don't think that you're going to be able to get this role because you don't have X, Y, and Z, or you don't have this. I really appreciated that information. I didn't take offense to it. I just figured out, okay, what part of the information they gave me relates to me, and how can I bring my strengths to the table? And I kind of just went with it with stride like that and figured it out, And I think we are all unique individuals. Yes, we have that PharmD or MD or PhD, but there might be something that stands out or in your experience, in your career path, that company is looking for. And so you just need to figure out what that is and be able to shine on your interview. Because once you're there, you just show them who you are, be authentic. Because just once you get the role, you're going to be successful in the role if you're authentic and you're able to connect with that provider, and you're not shy. You're willing to put yourself out there. They want to see that.
Yes, definitely. Another question I got was, especially as someone who doesn't have an industry experience, like how was the, transition period into industry? What was that process like for you? And how did you feel like you were able to get up to speed with the change?
So I was actually very lucky that I had a great onboarding schedule. They really took the time. We actually had a bunch of new aspiring MSLs that were able to become an MSL and at the time that I was being hired. And they had an amazing onboarding process. But with that being said, I think I was kind of a step ahead already. I had taken this course. I've also was listening to podcasts. Like I did a ton of research on this role and what it entails. And once I'm there, how and what will I do to become a successful MSL? So that was part of it. But I was just lucky that we had a great onboarding um, schedule, and they trained us really well.
So you think like what made it successful in terms of the onboarding process was like everything was thought out. You were able to like really get into the therapeutic area information. Like what made it successful?
So what made it successful was that they were able to not just train us on the disease state itself and the products, but also kind of give us kind of like the art of being an MSL, right? Like we had an actual senior mentors. We had different like calls. We had different senior mentor calls. We had different colleagues. Like there was more just like of a check-in. It was not like clinical. So we had a bunch of those things going on too. But I think what was really helpful for me also was that because I took this course, I was able to kind of apply what we did for practice in real life as well. So that was really helpful too. And I think that that part has just kind of improved. So maybe the company you joined, they may not have a great onboarding like the experience that I had. So those are things to kind of look into. That you really want to be that self-learner, that self-starter, because most things you may have that where you may be in that situation that you're not going to be taught certain things, and you'd have to be able to teach yourself.
Yes, definitely. And you already kind of spoke a little bit to, the process when you were learning about the MSL role, kind of the informational interviews that you did, like calling on, colleagues in your network. Can you talk more about the impact of networking in that process and, what sort of role you think it had in you actually achieving and like landing your first role?
So at first, I felt a little discouraged because of some of the feedback I got. Again, you don't have industry experience. Maybe you should try this role. I did feel like that, but then again, what I did was I kind of took it as, okay, what part of that conversation that I can take and kind of spin it into a positive attribute that I have that I can contribute to this role, kind of put that into a little bucket. And also, like, I'm always on LinkedIn. I connected with a colleague of mine that I went to pharmacy school with. And I asked him, I said, hey, I noticed that you didn't do a residency or a fellowship or anything, but you're an MSL and you have been for quite some time. What did you do? I want to know what you did. And it was a really funny, he's like, I hired a coach. And I was like, a coach? Like, what do you mean a coach? I don't need a coach. It was a really interesting conversation. And I said, I want this coach's number because I want to hire her now. Because if you can be an MSL, so can I. That was my attitude. And so there you have it. I signed up, but the problem was this was like November, and I think the course and everything wasn't available till like January, and I'm like, I can't wait that long. So then, in the meantime, I was doing my own homework, going on YouTube, going on Google, reaching out and speaking with more colleagues, and also looking at other roles like there's that I can, kind of educate myself on. So by the time that I actually met Sidoni, I was really well prepared, and she was really like impressed. She was like, wow, you really know your stuff. I was doing my homework. And that's what led me to this course.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love that so much of what you talked about is like following that real curiosity. Like you were so interested in learning the information. You wanted to make this transition and kind of prioritize it with your free time to dive into the information and, look to your network. And, in that way, like put yourself out there. I think sometimes people are a little apprehensive with putting themselves out there to be like, oh, wow, I'm kind of putting it all out on the table that like I do want to make this transition, that I am interested in all of these things. So I love hearing that, because I do think that people who are interested in like, following their curiosity, being that self-starter and putting themselves out there and having those informational interviews and learning on their own, and then also learning with the coach, I think that combination is really what's going to make people successful, because I think those are some of the cornerstones of being a successful MSL. And that actually leads me to my next question, that came in from one of our current clients, actually, who is asking, thinking about, what you know now, what do you think makes a successful MSL? Like, what are the 3 traits that you think make an MSL successful, particularly those who are like, looking for a promotion or who are really just doing a great job in their role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would go back to also saying like your communication skills. That's number one. Your ability to be able to connect with another person, let alone a healthcare provider. That's number 2. Number 3 is being organized, because depending on what your role is, you might have other responsibilities in the role that you will have to like establish, whether it's leading a conference or, maybe inheriting a new territory when you're already in the role, like in all of those things. So I would say those are the top three things for me. But Swati, I don't know if you have anything to add on to that.
No, I think that those are great. And you actually brought up a little bit earlier about like organization. You mentioned time management now, like, kind of being, in control of your schedule. I'd love to, be a little more, tangible with that. What sort of tips and tricks do you have from like for, like advice for people listening to best manage their schedule? And, I'm asking you, as it pertains to your job, but I also think it's very helpful for a lot of people that are, have a full-time job now. They have a full-on personal life, but they're also trying to figure out how to build in the time to, devote to learning about the MSL role and transitioning. So what sort of time management tips and tricks do you have that you think that, our, viewers and listeners can implement?
Yeah, I mean, I can first speak on how and what I did in terms of before even becoming an MSL, because I was working full time while I was taking this course and researching it. I didn't take any breaks after I sold my pharmacy. I was working, and I would actually wake up really early in the morning, and I was working on the course. While I would drive to work, I would listen to a podcast. It was like the MSL Talk podcast. While driving back, I would have a podcast on while I'm cooking. I'll be listening to the part of the course. So literally, I took it as another full-time job while I was working my current job, and that's how I was able to juggle like learning about the role, and then the whole applying for the role is a whole different job. That's like another full-time job within itself, because every morning I'll look, okay, what's the new posting? All right, so what are things I'm going to have to change on this one? So whether it's during my lunch break, if I had one, because if you're in community pharmacy or whatnot, you don't really get a lunch break, or before bed, where I have to change these X, Y, and Z, and you start becoming really good at being able to figure out what you need to add and edit for each role. It starts becoming like second nature to you. So that was another job within itself while I'm working my full-time job. So, all of those things, I think you got to figure out what's going to work for you. Not everyone can wake up really early in the morning and get things like that done. For me, it's when I get the most done. And then in terms of just being an MSL and staying organized, I think that I will say that when I lived closer to my territory, it was much easier because I was able to get a call or an email from an HCP and be like, oh, hey, can you come see me today? And I can just kind of drive on by. Now I live a little further, so it takes a lot more planning. And what I like to do is if I'm in a certain region and I have at least one or two meetings, I try to map out before and after, like, oh, who else can I just kind of stop in? So maybe I'll be lucky and they'll see me, or maybe I will be able to make another appointment. Maybe I can make it virtual. And I'm at the point where I've been in my role for a while, and so I'm currently actually pregnant, and I am due in a couple of weeks. So the flexibility that I get now is that I have that advantage and flexibility to go virtual. But I think that if I was in this situation a couple of years ago, that would have been harder because I didn't make those connections. Like now, I have HCPs that are on the other side of Connecticut, but when they learn that I'm pregnant, they're like, "Oh, I'll come to you." Oh, yeah, and I'm like, "This is great. I get to go to have dinner with them that's 10 minutes away instead of 30, 40 minutes away." And so they actually just kind of enjoy seeing you and just kind of learning about what's going on in your life, because it's more than when you're really into this role and you're connecting with these healthcare providers. It's not just about having that scientific exchange. You get to know them as a person, they get to know you, and that's part of the reason why they want me. They're so excited when I come in, or I'm booking a dinner or a meeting with them, because they want to see what's the latest with Queenie, and I want to know what's the latest with them. I'm a cat person, so I have several providers that have cats, so we exchange cat pictures and whatnot. So you got to find what commonality you may have. And again, it's like having that dinner date go right. And so there'll be a second and a third and a fourth date, right?
Exactly. And I always talk about, especially like with newer MSLs, it's like when you're taking notes from a meeting, like you might not take them during, but right after the meeting, when you're, jotting down all the notes and everything for follow-up, it's just as important to take down notes about like, what was that clinical, insight or that scientific exchange, bit of information, but also like what else can you write? So it's that EQ, IQ kind of combination of like, oh, is something going on like with their cat, for example, something going on like in their personal life that's important to them, that the next time you see them, you don't need to keep it all in your brain. Like that's why we have notes. And so you can just refer back to your notes and be like, oh, this is the person with like the really cute orange tabby. And then you like remember, and then you're able to like engage and like ask them about that. And so having that be a part of the relationship and building, at the end of the day, we're all just people. And so we don't just, we all love science if we're here, but we all want to talk about other things going on in our life that are important to us too. So just keeping that in mind when building the relationship, it's like you're really actually building a relationship. This is not just like some sort of transactional, okay, cool, you gave me this info, I gave you this info. It's more than that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, what I wanted to add to that was like, remember also when you're getting interviewed, the person interviewing is a person just like you and I, right? So again, be authentic, like be personable, be yourself. I think one of the biggest things that I just wanted to bring up is like, I've heard this like recently from colleagues as that people will use like AI to do their presentation or have like questions ready. And I mean, it doesn't, yeah, I heard that. And don't do that. Talk about your experience that you had at the hospital or in rounds or at the community. So yeah, that's just one thing I wanted to kind of bring up. Like you want to be personable because again, they want to be able to see that you're able to connect with them. And if you are able to connect with them, then you're able to be like a good MSL, it comes down, it comes back to that.
Absolutely. We do have another question in the chat here, so I'm going to pause on the ones that were sent in. So someone asked, does being a board certified MSL increase the chances of getting an MSL role? So I have a perspective on that. I can share a little bit of my perspective, and then Quinee, I'd love to hear yours. So I think that, getting that board certification, getting some sort of certification can only be beneficial because especially if you don't have industry experience, I think it can be beneficial because it shows that you put in extra time, effort, and energy to educate yourself on the role itself, on like how MSLs fit within the landscape of the pharmaceutical industry, how they work cross-functionally, like understanding KOL engagements, KOL mapping, all of those things are things that you'll learn within a board certified kind of like program. So I do think there is value in like what you can gain from the program itself. That being said, like, I don't think it's required. Like, it's not a make or break. Like, oh my gosh, this person doesn't have it, I'm not going to hire them. It's not like that at all. But I think what you can gain out of it beyond the, the specific letters and the specific certificate is actually a lot more valuable. So I would view it from that perspective.
Yeah. Definitely agree with you on that. 100%. I don't have anything to add to that. That was perfect and kind of took the words right out of my mouth. So I echo everything you just said.
Amazing. Yeah. And I mean, because I think that, being pharmacists, physicians, PhDs, like the people who are interested and, qualified to be MSLs, we are so used to thinking about like, okay, like what sort of board certification, what sort of like additional training, letters after our name, like those things like really, really matter to us. So I understand the perspective, and a lot of, clients who come to the MSL Academy are very, very interested in a board certification because they're used to thinking about education and credentials in that way. But it's not just about that. So that's my response. Okay, great. If you have any other questions, we do still have 15 minutes, so I can go back to my list over here from our current, clients and people in our network who've submitted questions. So, but whoever's live, please feel free to continue adding questions in the chat. So far, all of these have been great. So I guess, something else that maybe could be helpful. So this comes from another question. I'm going to kind of rephrase it. So if you're here, I am rephrasing your question. So looking back in knowing what you know now, what is like some of like the advice that you wish that you heard when you were going through this process?
That's a great question. I would just say that, like, I wish that, some of the people that I had spoken to would have been maybe a little bit more positive, maybe, because I think I had more like negative advice. That's the only thing I would say. But again, like, you just have to find a way. I I feel like it was such a long time ago. Like, I don't really know, how to answer that one.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's fine. I'm always wondering, like, because everyone has such different experiences. And I'm actually really glad that you shared that, going into it, you had some, kind of conversations that were trying to steer you away potentially from applying, because we haven't really heard that on the podcast recently or on, our lives that, someone has been, doing informational interviews, getting, information from their network and, kind of getting discouraged. So I think that's a great perspective, just in case someone else is also experiencing that, it is important to always take, what people are telling you with a grain of salt. Everyone is giving you their experience and their, kind of personal perception of everything. And so even like with what we're saying today, like take what serves you and, what doesn't. Definitely continue to build your network and engage with other people and take things along the way, but you don't necessarily need to internalize everything from everyone. Yeah. All right. Any other questions coming in from the chat?
I don't see any really.
Okay. I have another question here about KOLs and breaking down like what makes an effective KOL engagement. I feel like we talked about that a bit with the, like the professional component of the clinical insight, but also the kind of the EQ, IQ kind of mix. I feel like we kind of talked about that as well. Let's see. What else is here? I feel like we touched on most of these things. Oh, here's another one. Okay, what about talking about the interview process? So someone who hasn't applied yet, they're very interested in learning about what exactly is involved in the interview process and how many people will they be speaking to. It's kind of dependent on the company, but yeah, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, it really does depend on the company. I actually had 2 interviews at the same time. So the company I currently work for, I had 2 phone screenings with 2 different field directors, followed by 4 different video calls, followed by a scientific presentation. I think it was about 8 interviews for that one position. And I remember, like, I was like, what? I've never heard of 8 interviews for one job. Like, so that was intense. And then the other job the other role, it was another MSL role that I was interviewing at the same time. I think because I actually had a friend that worked in the company, they skipped like the initial one. And so then it went straight to, I think 2 different interviews, video, and then the next one was just a presentation, and that's it. But that was also a smaller company. And they got back to me much sooner, and I had the offer letter actually for that one, and I was waiting for this current role, and I was like, hey, I want to go with the current role I'm in now, but I do have this other offer. So not a bad situation to be in for somebody who thought that, or that's not going to be able to become an MSL. So I was really happy about that. But yeah, it depends on companies and their structure and how many, is it a large company, a small company? But just you have sometimes now they do have you come in person as well. For certain companies, I've heard that's kind of making a comeback. But usually it's a phone screening, and usually the phone screening before it even gets to the field director, sometimes it's even an HR phone screening. So there's that too. Yeah, but you most for like every role that I've heard of and that I've coached several other individuals that are applying for the role, they had a scientific presentation. So if you remember doing a journal club in pharmacy school or medical school, you will have to bring those skills back.
Yes, definitely. And some presentations, they might give you a journal article. Other ones, they might just say, hey, talk about anything you want to. And that's like the most overwhelming thing ever, because it's like, okay, what do I pick? Because you don't necessarily want to pick, if they're breast cancer, if you're applying to, for example,
Yeah.
A drug associated with breast cancer, you don't want to pick breast cancer because they're the literal experts, but you also don't want to pick something that's so completely far off that can't demonstrate, some level of expertise within oncology. So that definitely requires a little more like strategy and thought process.
That's a great point, Swathi. I know I had, so the role that I had now, I remember they had us choose between like two papers, and I chose the newer product because like I saw the person interviewing me was with the company for a long time. So I'm like, oh, they know the other product so much. So I'm not picking that one.
Absolutely. So there always is that element of strategy going into the interview process. Okay, amazing. So we only have a few minutes left. Is there anything else that, people want to ask about? If you have any questions, you can always reach out to either of us via LinkedIn. You're welcome to email me as well. My email is my first name at themslacademy.com. So it's just Swathi at themslacademy.com. So if any questions arise after, happy to answer them there or via LinkedIn DM. Just let us know if there's anything else we can do to support you in this process. We know that it can feel overwhelming. And I know we just talked about the interview process, which can also be overwhelming. But if it's something you're genuinely interested in, making the transition and committing to, this new kind of career path for you is going to be worth it. Absolutely. Oh, okay. A question in the chat. Do you believe they are looking during the scientific presentation? The reason for my question is because they only give you 24 hours to present your expertise in the article. Have you had that experience, Quinee, where they gave you 24 hours?
No, I have not actually. You could, if you like that trick I would just say, like, if you have an HR person, the middle person, maybe see if you can, like, be like, hey, do you think I can have a little bit more time? I don't see why not. Like they would like look down upon you otherwise. That's my opinion though, Swati. But I've never heard 24 hours. I had a good week to prepare mine.
Yep.
And then
the shortest
a role that the other one I had to choose the topic. So that one I only had like 2 days.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you have had like a 2-day sort of thing.
3 days, but that's because I was already kind of prepared for that one. If I needed more time, I think it was a conversation with an HR person, like, hey, when do you think you can do this presentation? And I was ready for it. So.
Got it. Yeah. I love your suggestion. Like if you feel like if it's 24 hours, oh, so this person's located in Panama. So maybe it's a little bit different with their hiring processes there with that particular company. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I haven't heard that before though.
But I would still suggest, I love what you said, Quinee, of just like, if they're open to it, liaising or speaking with the HR person or whomever you're interviewing with to see if you can have a little bit of extra time, I think that would be great. Yes. All right. Well, are there any like last things that you would like to share in our final minutes?
Just, keep it up. keep researching the role, see if it works for you. That's all I can say is, you can, listen to all the podcasts, take all the classes, but not able to use the tools and utilize them, then you're only gonna know what the role is about, and that's it. But you got to take action, and you got to be able to utilize the tools that you do learn in these the lives that you're listening to, or the podcast you're listening to. You got to take action on it, and that's the only way that you'll be able to move forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think right now there is like more and more content out there, which is great. I feel like when I was initially looking at an MSL role, there was like one podcast out there, and now there's so much more content, which is great. Just looking from YouTube all the way to, lives and podcasts. So yeah, I think that there's so much more now to learn, but I think sometimes it can kind of feel like a little bit like information paralysis. So, don't get, too overwhelmed by the amount of information, and just take notes, take what resonates with you. I also like when I'm listening to podcasts or trying to learn new information, I take notes on things, and sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm definitely going to have to listen to that again because that was a lot in a short period of time. So just approach it as like a part of the learning process, and definitely agree that taking action is so, so important. But of course, do it on your own time and do it in a way that works for you. Okay, amazing. So if you have any other follow-up questions, please, reach out to us via LinkedIn, or you can email me at Swathi at the MSL Academy. Alrighty. Amazing. Looking forward to next time. We'll be back this time next month. So keep a lookout and see you then. Alrighty.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.